Ethan Hale stood near the edge of Dock 7, holding a small travel case in his right hand. The starport was loud, bright, and crowded. Ships of many shapes floated in and out through glowing lanes. The air smelled like metal, fuel, and strange spices from alien vendors. Voices overlapped in dozens of languages, some sharp, some musical, some impossible to understand. Ethan was human, and that alone made him noticeable. Humans were rare this far from Earth's space. They were not feared. They were not admired. They were simply Buck. Odd. Most species saw humans as fragile beings who relied too much on words and rules instead of strength. Ethan knew this well. He had learned to keep his head down and his hands visible. He was not a soldier or a hero. He was a systems engineer. His job contract on a mining station had just ended, and he was waiting for a civilian transport to take him to the next stop. He wanted nothing more than a quiet journey and a warm meal. That was when someone grabbed his arm. The touch was sudden but not violent. Slim fingers wrapped around his sleeve. Ethan turned, surprised, and found himself face to face with an alien woman he had never seen before. She was tall and slender, with pale blue skin that shimmered slightly under the station lights. Her eyes were large and silver, filled with panic that she tried hard to hide. Her clothing was simple but worn, like someone who had been running for a long time. Before Ethan could speak, she leaned close and said clearly, in careful trade language, "Husband, please do not be angry. I was delayed." Ethan froze. "Husband?" People nearby turned their heads. A few aliens paused, watching with mild interest. Ethan's heart began to pound. He opened his mouth to deny it, to step away, to say there was a mistake. Then he saw what she saw. At the far end of the dock, 3 armored figures moved through the crowd. They were tall, broad, and walked with authority. Their armor was dark and marked with the symbol of the Central Authority. Enforcement agents. They were feared across many systems. The alien woman tightened her grip on Ethan's arm just a little. Her voice lowered. "Please," she whispered. "Do not push me away." Ethan did not understand what was happening, but he understood fear. He had seen it before, on stations where workers were treated as tools. He had felt it himself when inspectors came without warning. One of the agents looked in their direction. Ethan swallowed. Slowly, carefully, he placed his hand over the woman's. "You should not wander off like that," he said, forcing his voice to stay calm. "I was worried." The words felt strange, but they came out smoothly. The agent stopped a short distance away. His helmet tilted slightly as he scanned them. "Identify," the agent said. The woman straightened. "Lyra Hale," she said. "Registered bonded partner to human citizen Ethan Hale." Ethan's breath caught. She had used his name. The agent's visor flashed. He paused. Another agent stepped closer, checking a data pad. After a moment, the second agent made a low sound of annoyance. "Human bond," he said. "Protected status." The first agent hesitated, clearly unhappy. He looked at Ethan. "Is this correct?" Every instinct in Ethan's body told him to say no, to step back, to tell the truth. Humans valued honesty, but humans also valued something else. Choice? Yes, Ethan said. The word echoed louder in his mind than in the air. The agent stared for another long second, then stepped back. "Remain within legal zones," he said to Lyra. "This matter is not finished." The 3 agents turned and moved away, disappearing into the crowd. Only then did Ethan realize his hands were shaking. Lyra released his arm and stepped back quickly, bowing her head. "Thank you," she said. "I will leave now." "Wait," Ethan said before he could stop himself. She looked up, startled. "You used my name," he said. "How did you know it?" Lyra hesitated. Around them, the crowd flowed as if nothing had happened. Ships docked. Merchants shouted. Life continued. "I knew you would ask," she said softly. "May we move somewhere quieter?" Ethan looked around. Staying here felt dangerous. He nodded. "There's a seating area near the transit hall." They walked side by side. No one stopped them. The simple act felt unreal. They sat at a metal bench overlooking the docking lanes. For a moment, neither spoke. "I am sorry," Lyra said at last. "I did not wish to involve you, but I had no other choice." "You claim to be my wife," Ethan said. "That's a big choice." "In your culture, yes," she said. "In mine, asking is the highest respect." Ethan let out a slow breath. "Those agents were looking for you."
"Yes. Why?" Lyra's hands folded tightly in her lap.
"Because I am Veilborn."
Ethan frowned.
He had heard the term before. The Veilborn were a small species, known for living between major powers. They were skilled traders and thinkers, but they had no strong military. "And that's illegal?" he asked. "Not officially," she said. "Nothing is ever illegal officially." Ethan understood that too well. "They are claiming my people broke trade laws that do not exist," Lyra continued. "They are detaining us for review. Those who go into review do not return." Ethan leaned back, staring at the moving stars beyond the glass. "So you grabbed the first human you saw?" Lyra shook her head. "No. I watched you for 3 cycles." He looked at her sharply. "What?" "You argue with station officials," she said, politely. "You ask for written reasons. You wait. You do not shout. You do not threaten. But you do not leave." Ethan felt heat rise to his face.
"That's just how humans solve problems."
"Yes," Lyra said. "That is why your species frightens others more than it knows." He laughed once, dry and surprised. "Trust me, we don't frighten anyone." "You frighten systems," she said. "Because systems depend on silence." Ethan did not know what to say to that. A chime sounded overhead, announcing boarding for a transport. Ethan checked the sign. It was his ship. "I'm leaving the station," he said. "In 20 minutes. Lyra's shoulders sagged. "Then I have delayed you enough. Thank you for your kindness." She stood. Ethan stood too. "If I walk away," he said slowly, "will they take you?"
Yes. He closed his eyes for a moment.
Humans were not the strongest species. They were not the fastest. But they had a habit of stepping into trouble once they understood it. "What does bonded partner actually mean here?" he asked. Lyra looked at him, surprised. "It is a legal declaration of shared responsibility. It grants protection, but also obligation." "Like what?" "If challenged," she said, "you must speak on my behalf." Ethan rubbed his face. His transport would leave without him. His next contract would be delayed. His life would become complicated. He looked at Lyra again. She was standing very straight, like someone ready to accept whatever came. "Did you plan all of this?" he asked. She met his eyes. "I planned to survive." "All right," he said. "We need to make this official, don't we?" Her eyes widened. "You would do this?" "I don't know what I'm doing," he said honestly. but I know what happens when no one does anything." Lyra bowed deeply, her voice unsteady. "Then Ethan Hale. Thank you." As they walked toward the registration terminal together, the starport lights reflected off the glass and metal around them. No one noticed the small human and the alien woman. But somewhere in the system a record was being created, and nothing would be simple again. Ethan and Lyra moved quickly through the corridors of the starport, the crowd thinning as they went toward the registration offices. The bright lights reflected off metallic walls, and the low hum of ships filled the air. Ethan's heart was still racing. He had never imagined himself in a situation like this, standing as a husband to an alien stranger. But he had already made his choice. Humans acted when they had to, even if it scared them. Lyra led the way to a small office tucked away behind a long hallway of terminals and waiting areas. The room was quiet, with only a few officials typing at hollow screens. She motioned for Ethan to sit while she approached the main desk. Ethan followed, his hand brushing against his travel case as if it could ground him in reality. "I need to make a legal declaration," Lyra said in the universal trade language. "A bonded partner registration with Ethan Hale." The clerk looked up, expression unreadable. "You are human?" Ethan nodded. "Yes. You understand this makes you responsible for the individual you are declaring as bonded?" the clerk asked, raising an eyebrow. Ethan hesitated. The responsibility was not just legal, it could be dangerous. The authorities hunting Lyra would not give up easily. But he looked at her, her eyes wide and anxious, and he remembered what humans did when they chose to act. "I understand," he said finally. Lyra's hand brushed against his, a small gesture of relief. She spoke to the clerk again, giving the necessary identification codes. Her voice calm but precise. The clerk typed quickly, scanning data across multiple systems. Alarms briefly flared on the screen, but then the clerk leaned back, tapping a finger. "You are now officially bonded partners," the clerk said. "This gives the human legal protection over this alien. Any detainment or interference with her must be reviewed through the Interstellar Council." Ethan blinked.
"Wait, we're protected?" Lyra nodded, a small smile on her face. "Protected, yes."
For now. The weight of it pressed on Ethan. He had stepped into something far larger than any engineering contract or routine station visit. His mind ran over the possibilities. The Central Authority would not give up so easily. There would be investigations, challenges, and perhaps even trials. "We have time," Lyra said, sensing his worry. "We need to move. They will come again, but we can use the legal window." Ethan followed her out of the office. They moved into the docking area, past cargo loaders and maintenance crews. Every face they passed felt like a question, every glance a potential threat. Humans were underestimated across the galaxy, but that underestimation worked in their favor. People did not expect them to act boldly or think strategically. Lyra stopped near a window overlooking the hangar. "I will explain now," she said. "My people are being quietly erased by law, not by war. The Central Authority does not wish to fight. They prefer to remove us without notice. They claim trade violations, procedural errors, things that do not exist. Anyone who resists is punished or disappears." Ethan frowned. "And they would just take you if we weren't bonded?" "Yes," Lyra said softly. "And anyone else like me? I cannot go back. I had to find someone who could protect me, someone who the law would recognize." Ethan felt a chill. He had seen oppression in many forms, but this was quiet, clever, and relentless. Humans had laws that were clear and fair, or at least attempted to be. He realized that even in a galaxy where power and strength often mattered most, the human way of thinking could create shields stronger than armor. "Why me?" he asked. "Why choose a stranger?" Lyra looked at him steadily. "Because humans do not blindly obey. You question, you think, you act. Most species would bow and hide or argue without rules. You do not. That is why your species frightens them more than you know."
You are unpredictable.
Ethan chuckled nervously.
Unpredictable is one way to put it.
Unlucky might be another. She smiled faintly. "You are lucky today. The legal declaration buys time. A time is not the same as safety."
We must act next. Ethan's mind raced.
What could he do? He was not a soldier. He had no weapons, no army, no allies in this part of space. But he had a human trait that mattered more than any weapon: persistence. Humans solved problems through thinking, strategy, and patience. "Then what's the plan?" he asked. Lyra considered him for a moment. "We must challenge the Central Authority's claim, publicly, in a tribunal. It is a complicated process. Most species avoid it because it is exhausting and precise. But humans can navigate it." Ethan swallowed. "You think I can?" "I know you can," Lyra said simply. "You are human. You will question, and you will not accept answers that do not make sense. You do not fight with fists. You fight with mind and words. That is why you are the right choice." He stared at her. He had been thrust into something far bigger than any project or contract. But humans were built for moments like this. Even without strength or weapons, they could shift systems by refusing to accept false rules. "Fine," Ethan said at last. "We will do it. But I don't even know where to start." Lyra's eyes gleamed. "That is why I am here. I know the laws, the loopholes, and the records. Together, we can prepare." The next hours passed in a blur. They found a quiet room in the starport where Lyra had stashed some encrypted data drives. She pulled out the small devices and placed them on the table. Screens flickered to life, showing legal codes, historical precedents, and council rulings. Ethan leaned in, studying the codes. At first, it was confusing. Dozens of species rules intertwined with human regulations from centuries ago. But slowly, he began to see patterns. The Central Authority had relied on assumptions and ignored certain clauses that humans had written long ago. Small words, carefully hidden, could protect her and others. "This is amazing," Ethan said, tracing a code with his finger. "Humans wrote this?" "Yes," Lyra said.
Long ago, humans valued fairness, logic, and evidence.
Other species often value power over truth. This is why the law works. You have leverage. Ethan felt a new sense of confidence. He had never wanted to be in politics or legal battles, but humans thrived in systems others found confusing. He realized that even in a galaxy ruled by might and deception, his species had a quiet power. As night fell in the starport, the hum of ships grew softer. Ethan and Lyra continued to prepare. They reviewed documents, planned questions, and anticipated challenges. Every detail mattered. One wrong step could expose Lyra again. One overlooked rule could undo the protections they had just gained. Finally, Lyra looked at him. "Rest now? We have time." Tomorrow we begin the process of challenging them. Ethan nodded. He leaned back in his chair, exhausted, but focused. Humans often succeeded not because they were strongest, but because they were patient, thoughtful, and determined. He thought about what he had just learned about Lyra's people and about his own place in the galaxy. For the first time in a long time, he felt a spark of purpose. This was not a routine assignment. This was something bigger, something important, something that could change the lives of many, not just one. Lyra stood nearby, watching him with a calm intensity. "You are ready?" she said softly. Ethan looked up. "I hope so?" She smiled faintly. "You do not hope? You act. That is why you are human." Outside, ships passed silently. Inside, two unlikely allies prepared for a battle that was not fought with weapons, but with words, rules, and courage. And in that quiet moment, Ethan realized that being human was more powerful than anyone had given it credit for. The galaxy would soon see what humans could do when they chose to stand for others, even without strength, even without armies, but with nothing but their mind, their words, and their will. This was only the beginning. Ethan and Lyra boarded the small transport that would take them to the nearest tribunal center. The hum of the engines was constant, almost soothing, as they settled into the narrow seats. Lyra pulled out one of the encrypted data drives from her bag and began reviewing the files again. Ethan watched her fingers move quickly across the holographic interface, reading and cross-referencing information at a speed that made his head spin. He had learned a lot about his own species over the past day. Humans were underestimated across the galaxy, yes, but in this moment, that underestimation was their greatest advantage. Alien authorities expected humans to flee, argue, or fail under pressure, but humans had patience, persistence, and a sharp sense of logic that few species could match. Ethan was about to test that truth in real time. The tribunal hall was larger than Ethan had imagined. Tall ceilings stretched upward, filled with floating holographic panels displaying legal codes, council members' names, and historical precedents. The seats were arranged in tiers, and at the front sat the judges, a group of 4 alien officials, each from a different dominant species. Their eyes, or their equivalents, focused intently on the entrance as Ethan and Lyra stepped forward. Lyra leaned close to him. "Remember," she whispered, "they expect you to stumble.
They expect confusion. They expect fear.
You must show clarity, calm, and logic. Use the codes, question every assumption, and do not be intimidated by their size or status." Ethan nodded. His palms were sweaty, but he forced himself to relax. He had studied the documents for hours. He knew the loopholes, the ancient human clauses, the inconsistencies in the Central Authority's claims. Humans solved problems like this all the time. They questioned, they tested, they reasoned. The tribunal would see that today. The first official, a tall, multi-limbed creature with translucent skin, spoke. "State your purpose, human." Ethan stepped forward. "I am Ethan Hale. I am here to speak on behalf of Lyra of the Veilborn, my bonded partner, under the interstellar laws established by human precedent and recognized by the Council." A murmur ran through the observers in the gallery. Humans were rare in this part of space, and it was uncommon for them to address a tribunal directly. The officials exchanged glances. One of them, a reptilian species with sharp eyes, hissed softly, "You are unprepared. You do not understand the codes fully." Ethan took a deep breath. "I understand enough to question the claims being made against her. Every accusation must be backed by evidence, and every law must be applied as written. Anything less is invalid." The tribunal paused. They had not expected a human to speak with such precision. Normally, representatives from other species relied on intimidation or volume. Ethan relied on facts, codes, and reasoning. Tools humans used well, but others often overlooked. The second official, a being of shifting light, projected the first accusation. Lyra has violated procedural trade regulations, conducted unauthorized interactions with station systems, and evaded inspection. Ethan studied the documents. The trade regulations cited are not in effect. The references are to rules that were repealed decades ago. Her interactions with station systems were authorized under her assigned tasks and recorded for public audit. As for inspection, she was not given proper notice according to Interstellar Council requirements. All charges are therefore invalid. Another murmur ran through the room. Some aliens whispered to each other, clearly uncomfortable. Humans had a strange habit of following rules exactly, but questioning interpretations like this made the powerful nervous. They preferred obedience, not logic. The first official leaned forward. "You argue technicalities. We are concerned with safety and order, not codes written centuries ago." Ethan straightened. "Safety and order are only meaningful when applied fairly. Ignoring written law undermines both. If safety is invoked, it must be balanced with evidence, due process, and rights. Otherwise, it is tyranny." Lyra watched him closely, noting how calm he remained despite the intensity of the room. Humans had a resilience that was hard to describe. They did not panic. They did not overreact. They simply analyzed, prepared, and responded. She felt hope for the first time since she had fled her people's homeland. The third official, a massive insectoid creature with hardened carapace, clicked its mandibles. "Your words are clever. But cleverness does not replace proof. Where is the evidence that her actions were legal?" Ethan tapped a panel on the table in front of him, and the holographic display changed to show documents, approvals, and timestamps. All actions were recorded in the station's systems. They matched the requirements set by both station authorities and interstellar regulations. "This is verifiable, accessible, and undeniable."
The tribunal members exchanged uneasy glances.
Humans had a strange way of presenting facts, calmly, clearly, and relentlessly. They were difficult to intimidate, and more importantly, difficult to ignore. "Your species relies too much on law," the first official said, almost in a sneer. "But law is interpreted, not applied blindly." Ethan smiled faintly. "Interpretation is necessary, yes, but interpretation must be consistent. It cannot be used to erase an entire species. It cannot be used to punish someone without evidence. That is why the clauses I cited exist. That is why humans wrote them centuries ago, to protect individuals from arbitrary power." A hush fell over the room. Observers leaned forward. Aliens whispered among themselves. It was rare to see a human challenge authority with such precision and clarity. The fourth official, an aquatic being with a long flowing form, spoke. "And what do you request, human?" "I request that the charges against Lyra be dismissed immediately," Ethan said. "I request that she be recognized as fully protected under her legal status as my bonded partner. And I request that the Central Authority be held accountable for any unlawful attempts to detain her." There was silence. Then one of the officials muttered to another. The word spread. The human had cited laws no one had used in decades. He had questioned interpretations, exposed loopholes, and applied reason consistently. This was not what the council expected. They had anticipated confusion, delay, or fear, but not precision, not courage. Ethan continued. Finally, I request that the tribunal recognize that arbitrary enforcement cannot be allowed to continue. Any species, including the Veilborn, has the right to operate under law, not under intimidation or secrecy. Humanity has taught us that rule of law is stronger than weapons when applied correctly. That principle must be respected here. Lyra's eyes filled with gratitude. She had never seen a human act like this, not in her experience with other species, where power and threat usually dictated outcomes. Humans fought with mind and logic, with fairness and consistency. Today, that approach had real power. The tribunal members consulted with each other in whispers. Observers waited, tense and curious. Finally, the first officials spoke again. "We will review the evidence presented. We will verify the historical codes. If your claims are correct, human." He hesitated. Bonded partner. "Then the charges may not hold." Ethan nodded, keeping his expression calm. Victory was not yet guaranteed, but momentum had shifted. The room had seen that humans were not weak, not foolish, and not easily intimidated. They could change the course of law with words, evidence, and determination. The hearing continued for several more cycles. Each point Ethan raised was met with scrutiny. Each question he asked forced the tribunal to define terms they had used carelessly for generations: ownership, responsibility, due process. His questions were relentless but fair, pushing the officials to explain their actions in ways that made sense, or else admit the gaps in their own reasoning. By the end of the session, it was clear that the tribunal had underestimated him. Humans had a way of breaking assumptions, not by anger or force, but by persistence and clarity. Lyra had watched him face authority with no weapons, no armies, and no allies besides her, and she felt hope. Real hope. Outside the tribunal hall, the galaxy seemed to shift slightly. Information spread quickly, and whispers of the human who challenged the council began to circulate. For centuries, humans had been overlooked, dismissed, or underestimated. Now one human had shown that patience, logic, and courage could challenge centuries of quiet oppression. As they left the hall, Lyra turned to Ethan. "You did it," she said softly. "They may have power, but you have changed something they did not expect." Ethan shook his head. "I didn't do it alone. You prepared everything. You showed the records, the codes, the history. I only used what you gave me." She smiled faintly. Still, the human who stands firm, it is more than preparation. It is belief.
That is why I chose you.
Ethan felt a strange pride. Humans were rare, fragile, underestimated. But in the right moment, they could be unstoppable, not with force, not with weapons, but with mind, heart, and the willingness to stand for what was right. The transport back to the starport was quiet. Ethan stared out at the stars, thinking of the tribunal, the officials, and the power of reason. Lyra sat beside him, silent but attentive. They both knew the battle was not fully over, but the first victory had been won. For the first time, Ethan felt the weight of what it meant to be human in a galaxy that doubted his species. Humans were clever, adaptable, persistent. They could challenge authority, protect the weak, and make a difference, even when everything seemed against them. Lyra leaned closer. "Tomorrow we prepare for the next step," she said. "There are others like me. If we succeed fully, we can protect many more." Ethan nodded. "Then we do it. One step at a time. Humans are not fast, but we are steady. We do not give up." Outside, the stars moved silently. But inside the transport, two unlikely allies understood a new truth. Humans may not dominate with strength, but they could change the galaxy in ways no one expected. This was only the beginning, and humanity was just getting started. Ethan and Lyra returned to the starport under the cover of the night cycle. The station lights shimmered across the metal floors and walls, casting long reflections that danced as ships arrived and departed. Ethan carried the small data drives close to his chest. Each drive contained hundreds of pages of legal codes, historical rulings, and interstellar precedents. He had learned how humans could use rules to protect life, to challenge injustice, and to change outcomes that seemed impossible. Lyra walked beside him quietly, her eyes scanning for any sign of pursuit. The Central Authority would not give up easily. Their first encounter in the tribunal had shaken the officials, but it had not ended the danger. Once they reached a secure room that Lyra had prepared, she immediately began reviewing the tribunal's response. Ethan sat on a metal bench, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. Humans were not the strongest in the galaxy, not the fastest, and certainly not the most intimidating. But they could endure, they could think, they could act with patience, reason, and determination. These were the tools he would use to protect Lyra, her people, and perhaps others like her. Lyra spoke first. "The tribunal has acknowledged that some of the charges against me are invalid. That is a victory, but not the full protection we need. We must present the full case tomorrow, with every detail confirmed and every loss cited clearly." Ethan nodded. "Then we prepare tonight, one step at a time. Humans do not rush blindly, but we do not delay when action is needed." Lyra smiled faintly, impressed by the clarity in his words. "That is why I chose you. Other species would have argued or fled. Humans watch. Humans act with a mixture of logic and courage. They spent the night preparing." Ethan reviewed the legal codes, memorizing key clauses and understanding the loopholes that gave them leverage. He learned how human-created laws, some centuries old, could protect even alien species when applied correctly. Lyra explained the social and political structures of the Central Authority, noting where they often assumed compliance without questioning logic. Ethan listened carefully, recognizing that humans had a skill no one else had: the ability to follow rules strictly, question inconsistencies, and insist on fairness. By the first light cycle, they were ready. The tribunal reconvened larger this time with additional officials and observers from neighboring systems. The room buzzed with tension. The Central Authority had called in reinforcements, confident that the human could not stand again. But Ethan's calm presence unsettled them. They had underestimated humans once, and the lesson was beginning to sink in. The first official spoke. "Human, you have returned. Are you prepared to present evidence fully?" Ethan nodded. "I am. We have compiled every record, every approval, and every code necessary to show that the charges against Lyra are invalid. The Central Authority's actions are not justified under law." The tribunal projected the first accusation in detail. Lyra has conducted unregistered interactions with multiple systems, bypassed security protocols, and misrepresented her species in trade. Ethan stood and responded. All actions were documented, authorized, and verifiable. The interactions were approved by station systems and logged publicly. Misrepresentation is impossible when records show explicit identification. Each claim is either outdated, misinterpreted, or directly contradicted by evidence. "We request dismissal of all charges." Whispers spread across the gallery. The audience of species leaned in, surprised by the humans' confidence and clarity. Aliens who relied on intimidation or force could not understand this style of argument. Humans spoke with logic, evidence, and patience, and it was far more unsettling than aggression. The tribunal questioned, challenged, and tried to find flaws, but Ethan anticipated their moves. Each time he cited the human clauses, showing how they applied universally. He demanded definitions, explanations, and consistency. Officials faltered when faced with precise questions, realizing that centuries of assumed power could not stand against reasoning backed by law. Lyra watched him with awe. She had fled authorities who thought fear would be enough to control her. Now a human was exposing gaps, errors, and contradictions in a system she had considered untouchable. She felt hope, real hope, that her people could survive. The debate continued for hours. Ethan remained calm, precise, and relentless. Humans had a strange endurance for reasoning. While others relied on emotion, intimidation, or force, humans persisted. They repeated, clarified, and insisted on fair application of rules. By the end of the cycle, the central authority had little choice. They had to recognize that the charges were invalid, that the bonded partner declaration was legally sound, and that continued harassment could lead to severe consequences under council law. Finally, the first official leaned forward. "Human, your presentation is thorough. Your evidence is verified. Lyra of the Veilborn is recognized as protected under your bonded partnership. Any further detainment must be reviewed and justified according to council law." Ethan exhaled, feeling the tension release from his shoulders. The room was silent. The gallery of observers, once doubtful, now murmured with surprise and respect. Humans had accomplished something few species could. They had shifted the balance of power with words, logic, and courage. Lyra stepped forward. "Thank you, Ethan," she said softly. "You have done more than defend me. You have shown them the strength of humans and the value of fairness. My people can now look forward to safety, at least for now." Ethan shook his head. "I did what humans always do. We act when needed, we question, and we do not abandon others. That is the strength you saw." Lyra smiled, her silver eyes reflecting relief. Strength, yes, but also wisdom. Humans do not rely on weapons or size alone. They rely on thought, patience, and morality. That is why you succeed where others fail. Outside the tribunal hall, the galaxy seemed quieter, as if it was taking note of this rare event. Humans, fragile and underestimated, had not only protected an alien life, but also demonstrated that reason, law, and courage could challenge centuries of power. Rumors spread quickly through neighboring systems about the human who had confronted the central authority, and won with nothing but clarity and persistence. As they returned to the starport, Lyra turned to Ethan. "What will you do now?" Ethan thought for a moment. "We wait, we ensure the protections hold, and we help others if we can. Humans do not seek glory. We do what is necessary."
She nodded. Then we continued together. "My people will need guidance, protection, and allies."
"You have shown that humans can be more than expected. You are part of something larger now." Ethan smiled faintly. "Then let's make sure we do it right." They walked through the quiet corridors away from the tribunal and the public eye. The galaxy was vast, full of danger, opportunity, and unknown challenges. But Ethan understood something important. Humans may not dominate with strength, but they could change the world through intelligence, courage, and persistence. For the first time, he felt the full weight and pride of being human. Not just as a species, but as a force for fairness and justice in a galaxy that often forgot the value of thought over power. Lyra glanced at him again. Humans are underestimated everywhere. But now, they will not forget what one human can do.
Ethan nodded.
He looked at the stars beyond the station windows. He knew the journey was not over. There would always be threats, challenges, and forces that underestimated them. But humans had a way of persisting. They had a way of turning small actions into lasting change. And in that moment, Ethan realized that he had done something more than protect one life. He had demonstrated that humans, thoughtful, persistent, and brave, could leave a mark on the galaxy that nothing could erase. The galaxy would remember, slowly but surely, that humans did not fight with strength alone. They fought with minds that refused to accept injustice, hearts that chose to stand, and courage that would not bend to intimidation. Lyra and Ethan left the station together, not as strangers, but as partners bound by more than law, bound by purpose, by courage, and by a shared understanding of what it meant to protect life in a galaxy that too often ignored the small, the weak, and the underestimated. This was the true power of humanity, and it had only just begun.